Okay, in this conversation between Proctor and Abigail, I see a real sense of ambiguity here. And I wonder if this is deliberate on Arthur Miller's part in making us not feel confident about who we trust. Whose perspective of the situation do we trust? Whose version of the story do we trust? Who's honest? And it really makes us question the characters. So even the ones who we think that we can and should be able to trust, we soon realize that, well, they're not trustworthy either. And for me, I see that as Arthur Miller indicating to us that all his characters are flawed and that no one is a hero and there's no such thing. And so even his most morally upright characters have flaws and struggle to make the right decisions in their lives. So when Proctor says to Abigail, "Abby, you'll put it out of mind. I'll not be coming for you more." He's trying to be quite definite and certain in his language. It makes us wonder how many times has he come for her? And notice how often in the way that they talk about their relationship, Proctor is the one that seems to be the one doing the actions, and Abigail seems to be represented as being quite passive. And so it also makes us wonder, when was the last time they were together? And Abigail is not willing to believe this, because she genuinely, it seems to be, as the scene unfolds here, she seems to have genuine and deep feelings of attraction and love towards John Proctor, and it's in contrast to the way that he seems to be responding to her. And she, but at the same time, we're getting this sense that they know each other quite well, because he says, "You know me better," and it's almost in this way that I think that we should also compare this conversation to the ones that he has with his wife and how different they are. And I want you to pay attention here to the language that Abigail uses to describe their relationship. She says, "I know how you clutched my back behind your house, sweated like a stallion whenever I came near. Or did I dream that? It's she put me out. You cannot pretend it were you. I saw your face when she put me out, and you loved me then, and you do now." Okay, this language of this graphic sexual imagery, she's recapturing this moment, making it real, getting John to remember this experience immediately now, so that she can change his mind. And so, but she continues with, "I have a sense for heat, John, and yours has drawn me to my window. I have seen you looking up, burning in your loneliness. Do you tell me you've never looked up at my window?" And then she says again, "You are no wintry man. I know you, John. I know you. I cannot sleep for dreaming. I cannot dream, but I wake and I walk about the house as though I'm fine. You coming through some door." See the language that she's using. See if you can pick this up. Sweated like a stallion. Sense for heat, burning. And this, "you are not a wintry man." These words all have connotations with heat and fire, which we all associate with passion. And in contrast to the way that Abigail refers to and represents Elizabeth as cold, contrast is really quite obvious, isn't it? And that's reinforced also through her actions, where she is clutching at him desperately. And she is passionate, and she is like John, being open with her feelings and doesn't want to have to keep suppressing how she feels. And because everyone is in this town has to conceal their real feelings. And she seems to be constantly cut off by John and dismissed by him, and none does this more than when he refers to her as a child. Again, the second time that she's referred to as a child. And interestingly, she will use that to her advantage later on. But at the moment, in a flash of anger, she is offended by that. How do you call me a child? How can you call me a child? How can you call me a child after what we've done? And in a sense, I think also because of the way that John Proctor feels about what he's done, he's disgusted with himself and he's disgusted with her. Abby, I may think of you softly from time to time, which he admits, but I will cut off my hand before I'll ever reach for you again. And this is quite strong, violent, physical imagery here, and it's biblical as well, and has that connotations of if your hand causes you to sin, then cut it off. But it emphasizes his seriousness of how he is going to change. He's a changed man now. He's not going to do this anymore because he doesn't want to be a hypocrite. But it only reminds Abigail that the world is full of hypocrites. And that is demonstrated in this speech here. Look at this language here. I look for John Proctor that took me from my sleep and put knowledge in my heart. I never knew what pretense Salem was. I never knew the lying lessons I was taught by all these Christian women and their covenanted men. And now you bid me tear that light out of my eyes. I will not. I cannot. You loved me, John. Whatever sin it is, you love me yet. So see how, again, he was the one that was doing the action, took me, he put this knowledge. And what is that knowledge? It seems to be the truth of what people are really like. Her eyes were opened to the hypocritical nature of the people, and then we can get that sense through the way that she ironically refers to them as Christian women and covenanted men. We see that she's being incredibly ironic. She's being sarcastic. She doesn't think that these people are Christian at all. So we see this enlightenment that she has been given through her relationship with John Proctor. She has been taught the truth of this town. Her eyes have been opened, and she doesn't want to close it off again. And through her language, we see how desperate she is, and even the stage directions where she's in tears reinforce that. But what I see is quite sad, is that she talks about how John loves her, and for me, I would consider that it's really showing her naivety and the fact that she's confusing their sexual relationship with a loving relationship. And it's obvious that John Proctor doesn't necessarily love her, or perhaps he won't let himself feel that way. And potentially for John Proctor, he's physically drawn to Abigail in a sexual way, but he will not allow himself to love her. And so we're also seeing that Abigail is still quite naive and childish in her views of relationships, and quite naive in thinking that John Proctor would drop everything and be with her. And that's quite sad, but it's an interesting moment here. I think this is a very crucial moment because Abigail does not get what she wants. She can't control him through her, firstly through her sexual powers, her flirtation and her taunts, and then she starts to appeal to him. In this section, she changes tact and she's using more, sensory imagery and really strong language in order to to persuade him. She's being quite persuasive through her rhetorical devices. And then this last speech here, she becomes quite desperate and emotive in the way that she's speaking to him. But it doesn't work, and she won't get John. And so because of this, I think that this is what makes Abigail do what she does later on. And if John hadn't been so forceful with her, then potentially these subsequent events may not have happened. But we can clearly see that Abigail wants to seek revenge. She wants to ruin Elizabeth. She wants John, and she seems to be prepared to do whatever she can to make that happen. So this is quite an emotionally intense moment here. Abigail is genuinely bereft by the fact that John has ended their relationship. He does say to her, "I may think of you softly from time to time." But this shows something about his character here, how he recognises his own flaws, as he seems to be taking control of the situation to ensure that he doesn't make the same mistake again. He confesses that when he does make the mistake of thinking about her from time to time, but that he will never do it again. His guilt is also seen in the stage direction, angered at himself as well. And this gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Proctor. So why are we privy to this scene? Why are we exposed to their conversation? What is Arthur Miller doing in representing these characters in this way? Are we made to feel empathetic towards either of these characters? And is it through representing them in this scene that makes that happen? This scene draws our attention to ideas about truth and lies, deceit. Proctor tries to persuade Abigail to forget about the relationship, telling her to wipe it out of mind. Because it's revealing the importance of putting on an appearance in society. As when it's revealed that the girls had made some brew last night and that Tituba made it, she is immediately charged with witchery, showing really the dangerous nature of truth in this society. So this motif of truth and lies and deceit is mainly associated with Abigail's character in this act. We see Abigail lying to Paris about what they were doing in the forest the night before. She doesn't reveal what took place. So this scene again draws our attention to the nature of appearances and versus reality, for appearance's sake and for his own moral integrity. John wants this relationship to end. He doesn't want to be that hypocrite that he condemns. And then, as previously, the action and the intensity and the tension shifts when a character enters or exits. And at this point, Betty doesn't really enter as such, but she does come to life. Claps her ears suddenly and whines loudly. She starts screaming, and that draws everyone back on stage. So then we have this flurry of activity. All this action comes to the fore. Paris runs in. So we have Paris coming in. We then have Mrs. Putnam. She comes in. She's all feverish with curiosity. And then follows Tom Putnam. And of course, in comes Mercy as well. Everyone's coming in to see what's going on, and that heightens the emotion in this scene, and it enhances the hysteria. So it's interesting to see that Mrs. Putnam comes in, stirring the pot and adding these ideas. She cannot bear to hear the Lord's name. So she puts this idea forward as a proof of witchcraft If you're a witch, if you're an agent of the devil, you can't bear to hear the Lord's name. So there we go. There's proof. No one questions it. Everyone seems to be persuaded by that, but people, we don't reach that point just yet. Okay, so Arthur Miller is drawing out this moment of when the witchcraft really bubbles up to the surface and people start accusing. He's building to that moment, but he doesn't want to get there just yet. So he slows the action down. And how does he slow that action down? We see that he slows that action down when Rebecca comes in. So Rebecca, the voice of reason and common sense, she seems to lower that tension, the intensity when she comes in. It's almost like Putnam wants to demonstrate that he's an authority and that he's the one that's come up with the idea by peddling this superstition. It's a notorious sign of witchcraft afoot, a prodigious sign. Okay, this is his evidence. It's a sign. So prodigious means it's impressive or it's remarkable. It's great in insignificant. It's great in significance. That would have been quite confusing. So Paris is flip-flopping around. He seems to can't quite be firm in what he thinks and feels about this situation. And he seems to be easily influenced by what other people are saying, but he also doesn't want to be bullied and pestered into any form of action. So people seem to they're all wanting him to act and to be a man of his word, but he doesn't seem to be able to do that just yet. So he seeks out Rebecca and wants her advice, wants her sign. He really starts to believe that she can't bear to hear the Lord's name. So he's repeating what the Putnams are saying. And so it's really interesting to see that Rebecca is not easily led like the others, and she's very much like John Proctor as well. But she is, as we read in these notes, she is respected, and because of her position in society, because of their wealth, I guess, she's also becomes a victim of other people, people who want their land, people who are jealous of her. So it's quite a sad story with Rebecca, and we know that later on when she is accused, she refuses to sign that she is in fact a witch, and she won't do it. So she is a great character, and she really is the voice of reason here. And so people look to her in this as a sort of as an authority, I guess, which is quite interesting. This is demonstrated when they ask if she'll go to Ruth and see, that's actually, they feel like she's got some sort of spiritual powers. And she, gives them doesn't really give them what they want, and she doesn't tell them what they want to hear. And she can see straight through this situation. Because of her experience as a mother and as a grandmother, she understands children, and she understands their silly seasons. And when it comes on them, they will run the devil bow-legged, keeping up with their mischief. She knows that children can be silly and naughty. She knows that nobody is born good and upright. So it's a shame that nobody really believes her and takes her advice, even though they ask for it. She sees that, yes, she'll wake up when she's ready, when she tires of all the attention and gotten over this little game, she will wake up. A child's spirit is like a child. You can never catch it by running after it. You must stand still, and for love, it will soon itself come back. And so throughout this part of the act, we can see this voice of reason, of common sense, of concern through Rebecca. And it's through Rebecca that we see that Arthur Miller is foreshadowing. So see these comments that Rebecca makes here. I hope you are not decided to go in search of loose spirits, Mr. Paris. I've heard promise of that outside. And then later on, she says, there is prodigious danger in the seeking of loose spirits. I fear it. I fear it. Let us rather blame ourselves. Here we have this warning and this sense of foreboding that we can see that something bad is going to happen. What she says will in fact happen. And that's the great technique of foreshadowing, is that we see this is what will happen when you don't listen to common sense. People are preoccupied with the devil, with their own sense of self-importance, with their own greed and desires. And they are blinded by that. And so they don't actually see what's really in front of them. So when Paris says, are wide opinions running in the parish that the devil may be among us, and I would satisfy them that they are wrong. And it's interesting because actually, in a sense, he's ironically quite right, quite correct. It's very true that the devil is among them, in the sense that there are people doing really harmful and immoral things here, but they're just not seeing it. We see Paris and Proctor's relationship bubbling along. This scene very much demonstrates all the tension and the conflict between the characters, and to the point where we are not surprised that these accusations occur. We're not surprised by these events, because what would you expect when all of these people are behaving like this towards each other? John Proctor has no qualms in challenging Paris and getting him to expose himself as a fraud. And so when Proctor says, then let you come out and call them wrong, did you consult the wardens before you called this minister to look for devils? Proctor's very acute in his criticism about pinpointing, and what is actually wrong with the way that Paris leads. And being this community, it's not designed to have one person in total power. You're meant to make decisions together. And Proctor makes reference to that later on as well. But Paris wants to be the one in charge. And he says, I am sick of meetings. Cannot the man turn his head without he have a meeting? He may turn his head, but not to hell. See how Proctor is not afraid to say what he thinks here. He's not afraid of Paris. He's not afraid of Paris's threats, and he will say what he thinks. So it's interesting to see that as soon as Rebecca arrives and when all that characters come back, the action of Betty crying and screaming and everyone coming together, it seems to project all of these conflicts, and the action and the intensity continues to grow and develop. We seem to be getting, everyone seems to be airing the dirty laundry in a way, because we also see Mrs. Putnam seems to be quite jealous of Rebecca. when she says, "You think it's God's work, you should never lose a child, nor a grandchild either, and I bury all but one." And so we really get to see the hearts of these people, that we can see that Mrs. Putnam is going to be using these situations to her own advantage. And so these ideas about power and authority seem to be demonstrated to us by Miller in this scene. Who's in charge here? Who wants to take charge? Who has authority? Who has power? Who thinks they have it but doesn't? Putnam is very commanding here and telling Paris what to do, because Putnam thinks that he's superior of everyone else. Proctor puts Putnam in his place and says, "You cannot command Mr. Paris. We vote by name in this society, not by acreage. It's not about how much money and land you have. That makes you powerful. You don't call the shots." And then Putnam throws it back at Proctor, saying, "Oh, I've never heard you worried so on the society, Mr. Proctor. I did not think I saw you at Sabbath meeting since snow flew." And so in a way, to put Proctor back in his place, Putnam's indicating that, well, you don't seem to ever indicate that you have an interest in this society. You don't come to the meetings, you're not involved. Who gives you the right to have a voice? So here we also are getting ideas about the individual and the collective. So when Proctor is seen interacting with Paris and the Putnams, he seems to be isolated from the others because of the fact that he does not give importance to society and does not try to create the appearance that he does either. He's seen to be blunt about his beliefs, openly stating, "I like not the smell of this authority," when referring to the church, not even caring about the consequences of his actions, which is quite sad because in a way we get this feeling that they'll probably come back to bite him. He's also set apart from the others, specifically from Putnam's and Paris, in that he has his own vision of decent conduct, which these other characters seem to really lack. The theme of the individual versus the collective, the community, is evident throughout this act and the remainder of the play through Proctor's character. So that's what I think Miller's doing often with his characters. His characters represent particular ideas as well. Miller also believed in this idea of tragic heroism, an everyday man struggling against the forces he cannot overcome, fighting for dignity. That's what Proctor seems to embody. So Proctor is isolated. He sets himself apart from the others, and so Putnam seems to throw that back at him and says, "Well, you can't have a say. If you want to be separate, then you don't have a voice here." But that doesn't seem to stop Proctor, and he still will have his voice. And he, in this section, is very critical of Paris and his sermons, saying that all we ever hear you preach is about hellfire and bloody damnation. You hardly ever mention God anymore. And you can see that Paris really does not like to be criticised so openly and so publicly as well. Well, that's a drastic charge. And Rebecca chips in here as well. And it's interesting because Paris says, "I do not preach for children. It is not the children who are unmindful of their obligation towards this ministry." And so it seems like Paris preaches to people to remind them of their obligations, and not about teaching them the word of God and reminding them about their relationship with God and their place in this world and how they can every day continue to change their hearts so they're more like Jesus. That's not his role. It's about their obligations. And it's because of this narrow-mindedness that Paris is inadvertently being quite ironic, because the children seem to be part of the problem as well. They're the ones that are instigating this problem with the witchcraft, and people are blinded to that. And it's with this narrow-mindedness that the characters are blinkered, that it prevents them to see what's really right in front of them. And it also exposes that the adults and how they are behaving badly. And if they were not so distracted by their own issues and their conflict, they will probably see what's really going on. So, and unfortunately, then there's another conflict that arises. Where is my wood? And so, interesting, Paris seems to, at this point, see that he sees to be a bit under attack. So now he's going to start deflecting, and now he's going to start building up his own sense of importance and authority, and in order to establish that he should be more appreciated than he really is. So let's take a look at the next section and see how that unfolds.